Hello, everybody. Man, it's been a whirlwind of a couple weeks. Hey, I wanted to hop in tonight. I want to talk about specifically boundaries again. I know I talked about boundaries just a few weeks ago. If you go back and you're watching, you're like tabulating and say, Joe, you talked about boundaries like 3 weeks ago. Yeah, I know. I keep a calendar of what I talk about. However, what I want to share because I know what's coming up, right? As of right now, it's towards the middle to end ish of November, and here in the United States, Thanksgiving is coming up the end of next week. It's actually to really date this video, it's a week from today. So I want to talk a little bit about boundaries in a family setting, because here's the thing with when we start talking money, we start talking like impact and on all this stuff. We're really good when we're on our own, meaning when we're not interacting with our family, then we can kind of be the person that we've created, I would say, in a way, and that's not a bad thing, right? You have different personalities and different people, but through all the personal development work and all the work you have been doing, there's a persona that starts to come out. It's the truest form of yourself if you do all the tools and follow the stuff and you like get in and really start working on yourself. And I fall in this trap too, right? I'm like my person. The thing is, when you go back home, meaning when you go visit your parents, when you go visit the family, when you're back in a combined space with people, what happens is we tend to revert back to how we used to be or how they perceive us. And it's really hard to break that mold. It's really hard to get them to interact with us a different way because we have to retrain them. And it doesn't happen overnight. So that's why I want to talk about boundaries, because with this coming up, uh, of anybody who decides to travel during this time, or if you're local with your family, and however the pandemic is influencing Thanksgiving and family gatherings, it's definitely something to think about. Because if not, then what happens is we end up having an okay experience. But if we're working on this mental kind of gymnastics, I would call it, right? In the personal development, we're working on things and working on money, and conversation comes up and says, "Hey, yeah, I had this guy who told me to talk to money, right? Or I have this money stack sitting on my desk, and there's all these weird things." They're gonna look at you weird. How do I know? Because this the same thing happened when I started kind of down my personal development journey, and when I started coaching, my mom started seeing some changes, and she was like, "Hey, Joe, what's going on?" I'm like, "Oh, I know what's going on," but then like the processing went on in my brain. I'm like, does she really want to know what I'm doing? So I asked her, I said, "Do you guys really want to know what's really happening?" And she's like adamant about it. Like I figured, like, I don't know, figure out how to like really tap into like myself and change in a way that wasn't weird. I mean, it's not really weird. I don't see it weird, but from an outside perspective, sometimes personal development tools and things like this can be a little weird. So I told her. And in the next breath, she changed the conversation to a different topic. I'm like, okay, so that's a little different. And every time I show up, I get stronger and stronger about holding my boundaries. So the person who I am, and not reverting back to the person I used to be. So this is important, right? The longer we can stay in the persona of who we are, really that true inside, the person who's been changing the rules, been setting up new rules, been setting up new boundaries, then what happens is other people start to perceive us and see us for what we really want to be. Okay? So boundaries are important in that aspect, because if not, then every time we go back and every time we go, back home and to family gatherings, and when the holidays come up, by the end of the holidays, we're just burnt out. The real reason is because we've been being somebody that we don't want to be anymore. We fall back into old habits. We fall back into um, old behaviors. And we fit their mold. And that's a problem. Because guess what? We don't want to fit their mold. We don't want to be that person who we used to be with them. We really want to be somebody new, somebody different, because it feels better. And I don't know about you, but when I'm my truest self, when I can hop in here and talk about money and see how people interact with it, and share things with my family in little bits, I feel more empowered to continue my work. I feel better. I feel jazzed up. Exercise. I feel like just jazzed up and ready to go. And when I don't, when I fall back into those old behaviors, I walk away like feeling like, oh, like this is not who I want to be. And sometimes we can get stuck in that and get in a funk. So here's what I'm gonna give to you. There's a couple of things. Because when it comes to boundaries, other people can't perceive us for who we are if we can't see us for who we are. Right? If we can't be, I'm going to roll in like there's an attitude of consistency, right? But if we can't be consistent in what we're doing, we have a hard time building trust with ourselves. But if we can be consistent with our boundaries, right? The attitudes kind of blend into one another. So don't get lost here. If we be consistent with our boundaries, that starts with us. So really, the truths are, the more you can stay in pocket, right? It's like the quarterback, like the more you can stay there and he can, see what's going on. The more you can stay in your zone of genius, the better off you are. It all starts with boundaries. So here's what I got for you. Again, before you go do the family events next week, before you go do your next family event, really sit down and just look and say, what do I want this interaction to be like? What boundary I'm going to hold? And sometimes those boundaries can be like, what am I going to say? What am I not going to say? That's a boundary. What kind of, I don't say argument, but it could be like, I don't know. Depends on what you want to talk about. But it's like, what are you willing to stand for? What do you aren't? Pick your battles. Not all of them need to be won. But choose and write a list and be like, hey, I know this conversation is going to come up where it could, and here's my stance on it, and this is what I'm going to hold firm. And we don't need to be all nasty over all our families and be like, oh, this is how I am, blah, 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 like I'm going to get you. But we can come across in a way that, hey, that's the conversation I want to have. And I can come across and choose to be like, hey, I want to have this conversation with you. Let's have a conversation and not an argument. Okay? So sit down, write your boundaries, write the rules. You can call them rules because that's what boundaries really are, about how you want to interact with people over this next. It's really the holiday season overall, right? So as the year kind of slows down, write your rules for how you want to interact with people. Because I guarantee you, as you do that, you're going to get pushback. That's the first kind of warning. You will get pushback, and that's okay. And the more you do it, the more that you'll get comfortable in being yourself, and the more comfortable that you'll get in helping other people see that too. And the cool thing about it, the more you do it, one day it'll just be like almost like a light switch, and then they'll start treating you the way you want to be treated. But you got to train them. Okay, so you got to start with you first. So that's where we want to pull it back to. So boundaries for you. Set those and start holding them to yourself. Start holding yourself to the same boundaries. Don't give yourself a pass. Because when we give yourself a pass, then we're basically opening the door for other people to do the same thing. And that's easy enough to do. Catch yourself when you say something like, hey, I don't want to say, or I want to change my perspective about X, Y, and Z. Catch yourself and be like, oh, that's not what I wanted to say. That's not who I am. I want to say it a different way. But if we don't sit down and at least establish the boundaries, then we never really focus consciously on what's going on. And if we don't focus consciously on it, then it's really hard to change. If you want to change, start changing yourself. Change your boundaries. Set your boundaries. And then, guess what? And the more you do that, the more Ben shows up. Right? And the more that the money shows up in your life. We talk about the money because the money is an important reflector. But at the end of the day, it's all about you and your interactions and what you choose into and what you choose out of. Choose into you. Choose into that pure, authentic piece of you. When you do that, you'll find the greatest joy. And when you find joy, money always follows. So work on your boundaries. Have a great week next week. Haven't decided yet if I'm going to come in. So I may post something early on in the week. However, but start thinking about the setup now. Don't wait until Wednesday night before you go, or Thursday morning before you go visit your family, and be like, oh, Joe mentioned something about setting boundaries. I need to do that right now. No, start now, so you have time to think about it and process it. So let me know if you have any questions below. I'd love to hear your stories about how you're going to change and what boundaries you're going to set in place, because the change is good. Even though other people might not see it yet, it is really good. It can feel uncomfortable at first, but that's good. So let me know. And until next week, enjoy. See ya.